let's explain that a little bit more in a second. What is the most complex thing that you can think of in the universe? The most complex structure in the universe? A triangle. What did you say?
What did you say?
Complex structure.
What's the most complex structure
In the world.
the brain?
Yes. What else are some things that are very complex?
Statue of Liberty.
Statue of Liberty.
I couldn't even draw a straight line. It's like a wave. This is me. It looks like a bus with a shell on it.
The concept of a baby being born? Yeah, I mean, that kind of fits. How about one of these? Pretty complex, right? So Hallie already said it. The most complex thing that there is the human brain, okay? The mind. The brain is super, super complex. According to Northwestern Medicine, our brain stores capacity considered virtually unlimited. Like, your phone's got so many gigs, right? Or your PS5's only got so much storage for your video games, your Xbox, whatever. Your brain is like limitless. The brain is super complex, okay? And though, here's the thing, the brain is an organ. Like you've got a heart, you've got liver, you've got kidneys, you've got stomach, skin is actually an organ. What's some other organs? I think I'm looking at the intestines, pieces of the body. What? Lungs. Okay. The brain, out of all of those, is the most complex. And your brain can get sick, just like all those other different things can get sick. Your brain can also get sick. And that's where we get into mental illness. Let me say this first. Mental illness is not sin. Mental illness is not sin. If you were to break your arm, we wouldn't be like, you're a sinner, you broke your arm. Okay. You can have mental illness and not sin. It is not a sin to have mental illness, okay? It is not. That is some of the lies that society, that even people that meant well maybe in the church had talked about, but mental illness is not sin. In a couple weeks, probably next week, I'm hoping Mr. Blake will be able to be here. I haven't talked to him about this. Mr. Blake is in school for counseling. He's studying how the brain works and mental illness and all of those things. And maybe he'll be here. Is he got class next week?
He doesn't have class because counseling, but he'll be here shortly.
Oh, he'll be here shortly tonight. Great. So, anyways, the brain, it can become sick. It is not sin to have what we would say is mental illness or to have a sick brain. Mental illness is something that is a permanent, it can be a permanent situation, but mental health is the way that it affects the way you think and act on your emotions. I want to say that again. I've got to highlight. Mental illness is something that is a permanent situation or can be. Mental health is the way that it affects the way you think and act on your emotions. So it affects all of you. Jason, I got some slides back there. If you can just kind of follow along as I go, that'd be great. So you can have mental illness and still be mentally healthy. Does that make sense? So you can have a mental illness that is treated through different ways that we treat things, and we'll talk about that, and still be mentally healthy. So tonight really is kind of an introduction of this, and then next week we're going to get specific about things, certain different things, and then each week kind of be a focus on stuff. So let's talk about some different types of mental illness. Some that we always think about are the main ones. Just shout out things you think of. Anxiety, okay. Depression. Insanity. That's gone completely. Depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, substance abuse, ADHD, substance abuse disorders, eating disorders, ADHD, OCD, that's another one. Yes. PTSD, ADHD,
multi-personality.
Yes, dementia, bipolar, is that it? Hopelessness.
It's on the thing. Bottom left corner.
So there's all these different mental disorders. Now, I think probably for most of you in here, the ones that hit home most with you are probably like depression, anxiety, and ADHD. You may deal with other things too. You may have other things that I don't know about, but I would say overall, as students, those are the things that we hear the most about because your generation has more anxiety than any other generation in history. Okay? So it's something that's on the forefront of everything that we talk about as young people. You're dealing with it. It is hard to live with illness, but it can be done. It can be done in a healthy way. And so that's where we're going with this. Mental illness, mental health. There's no sin in saying, you know what, I'm struggling. I struggle with depression. Or I struggle with anxiety. I struggle with whatever it is. It's okay. It is not sin. Okay, it is not sin. When you wouldn't talk to your friend, like I said, be like, you broke your leg, you're a sinner. Like, you're playing a football game and your ankle snapped in half. You sinner. No, that makes no sense. Some of you football players would just like, no, please. Never. So it is not sin to be mentally ill or to need mental health or to need help in those situations, okay? Go to John chapter 9, verse 1 through 3. That's where I'm going to be at here in the second here. The Bible is full of imperfect people. Full of people that are imperfect, both mentally, spiritually, emotionally. But despite all of that, God still uses them and accomplishes His plan for the universe through imperfect people who have mental health issues or mental illness. Full of them. Full of people with problems. So know that God has made you and can still use you as a disciple of Christ, as somebody who knows and loves and has a relationship with Jesus Christ. No matter if you have ADHD, anxiety, depression, or all the above, Let's read John chapter 9, verse 1 through 3. I think it'll be on the screen as well. John chapter 9, verse 1 through 3. As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus answered, It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but the works of God might be displayed in him. So here we have the disciples getting it wrong. They're like, okay, this guy's blind, so obviously there must be some sin in his life, or his parents must have been sinful. There obviously must be a problem with his life. And Jesus basically tells them, it was not this man's sin or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. So Jesus is saying it's not sin. It's not the sin of his parents. It's not the sin of him. But it's so that God would be glorified through him. Now, this was like a traditional religious view of Jewish people. If something was wrong with someone, if they were unhealthy, if they were broken, if they had leprosy, if they were blind, whatever it is, then the Jewish people would say, okay, well, there must be some sin in his life. There must be some sin in his parents' life. He must have did something basically to deserve this. And Jesus says, no, not at all. He said, this is to glorify me, to glorify God. It's not sin. When we struggle with mental health and health issues in general, God doesn't just see us as sinners. So if you are here tonight as a student, you're like, man, I struggle with anxiety, I struggle with depression, I struggle with bipolar disorder, I struggle with whatever it is, PTSD. What's PTSD stand for? Somebody tell me.
It's post-traumatic.
Post-traumatic stress syndrome. No matter what you deal with, God doesn't look at you and say, oh, that person has mental illness, they're a sinner. God doesn't see you and view you in that way. He sees us as children. If you have a relationship with Christ, you're a disciple of Christ, He sees you as a child of His that is struggling. And that's a big deal to Him. God is a compassionate God who loves us even in our mental illness, even in the things that we deal with. And then He goes on, and I'm going to hit this a little bit more, I already kind of talked about it. But this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in Him, right? That's what Jesus tells us. What would it look like if the works of God would be displayed in this man's life? As a blind man, what would it look like? What would it look like if somebody with ADHD was used by God? ADHD people, maybe some of you have ADHD in here. ADHD people are typically really creative, super creative, right? creative and curious people that kind of think outside of the box. What about somebody that struggles with anxiety and depression? Typically, they're very empathetic towards people. They're really compassionate towards people because they know what it's like. God can use all of these different things that we would say we're broken, we're messed up, we're damaged goods, we live on the island of misfit toys. He can use all of those things for His glory, His purpose, His ministry. You know how many people with ADHD work in church creative teams all over the United States of America doing PowerPoints and ProPresenter and tech things or design things? Tons of them, okay? God is using people with what we would say is mental illness all over the world for His purposes, His plan. So, mental health does not equate brokenness. We're not broken items. We are loved and cherished by God, and God cares for us. And hopefully we can think about that in a different way and not equate, well, you have ADHD, or you have anxiety, or you have depression, or you have PTSD, or you have whatever it is. You must be broken. You must be a sinner. Hopefully we can move past that. So how does this kind of apply to us here? Where does this take us? And this, again, tonight is kind of just a little bit of an introduction to all of this. You're either in one of two places, okay, two groups. Either A, you suffer from mental illness. You have depression, you have anxiety, you have PTSD, you have bipolar disorder, you have any or all or some of these things. Maybe that's you. The other part of it is maybe you have none of these things. You would say, no, I feel pretty healthy. You know, depression too is, we all struggle with depression from time to time. Your cat dies, your mom dies, you lose your favorite pencil. You know, there's things that are sad. And those things pass in times, and we rely on God. But depression in this sense is a long-lasting effect. So either you struggle with mental illness, or you'd say, no, I'm not in any of these categories. So I want to look at these couple things and kind of address both groups. So the first group is, hey, you would rate, if I ask you tonight, are you in the group that struggles with mental illness? You would raise your hand and say, yes, that's me. This is for you, this part. The first thing I want to tell you is that you are not alone. And I know that sounds so elementary and so I've heard that a couple times. It's true. You are not alone. You're not the only person on the planet that has ever suffered from whatever it is you're suffering from. From the beginning of time, we have seen suffering. Since the fall of man, we have depression and PTSD and anxiety, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia, and all of these different things because of the fall of man in Genesis. When sin entered the earth through Adam and Eve, when they ate of the apple, when they disobeyed God, sin entered the earth. And that is why we have all of these things. And ever since then, thousands of years ago, we have had suffering, mental suffering. So you are not alone. You're not the only person going through this. Psalms 130, verses 1 and 2 says, out of the depths I cry to you, Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Psalm 6:3 says, my soul is in deep anguish. How long, Lord? How long? This is the Old Testament. Anguish. You ever feel anguish? Deep pain, right? You feel pain. Calling out of the depths to the Lord. So you're not alone. This has been happening since the beginning of time. Suffering has happened since the fall. So here's a little statistic for you, okay? According to the National Institute of Mental Health, estimated 49.5% of teenagers, that's 13 to 18, struggle with mental illness. Half. So half of you tonight struggle with mental illness. Half of your peers at school struggle with mental illness. 13 to 18-year-old. Super, super common, okay? You're not alone. That just proves it. The person you're sitting beside may not struggle with mental illness, but the person beside them probably does. Half. 50%. 49.5. Basically, 50%. Half struggle with mental illness. You're not alone. Here's the thing. Being not alone, sometimes it sounds great, but then we just kind of leave it there. The part of not being alone is because you're not alone, if you can realize, hey, I may not be alone in this, then that allows you to be open and honest. Because your friends are struggling with the same things that you're struggling with. Anxiety, depression, which leads, loneliness leads to depression. And I think, this is not in here, but social media, and I don't have a stat for you or anything. Social media, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, all these things leads to depression and anxiety and all these things. Because what do? We compare each other. We see somebody who's doing like cool things. That's all they put on Instagram or wherever, Snapchat, and we feel depressed about it. Why are you not doing it? So your generation struggles, half with that because y'all are the ones that have been inundated with social media, all of this. Okay, so you're not alone in your struggle. We're not alone. Loneliness can only exist if we stay silent. So you need to talk about, hey, I struggle with being nervous, being anxious about things. Talk about it. I know that's difficult to do, but find someone you trust and talk to them about what you're going through. You go to the doctor, right? When you hurt yourself, most of you in here, hopefully, if you get severely hurt, you're going to go to the ER. Your parents are going to take you to the ER. If you break your arm, you're going to go to the ER. If you, I'll just take it back together. If something happens, though, we go to the doctor, right? Why then should we not go to the doctor for our brain? Right? We go to the doctor when our body physically hurts. Well, guess what? Your brain is part of your body. Everyone in here, I'm pretty sure your brain is inside. It's part of your body. Some of you have probably left it at home, but most of you have it with you. And we go get checkups. Tomorrow, I'm getting a checkup. You know what they do when they give me a checkup? They're like, you're fat. You probably shouldn't eat as much. You're doing good though, thanks. That's literally all my doctor's appointments. We're going to take some blood from you. You're short and fat and have bad genetics. Good luck. Really. I'm like, yeah, doctor, I tried salad and, not pork belly. I eat pork belly a lot, actually. Bacon is good. What can you do? Pizza. It's good. But I go get a checkup. They're going to take my blood. I can't eat anything after midnight tonight so that they can take my blood tomorrow and do normal tests and just make sure, okay, everything's good with your blood. We get checkups. It's okay to get a checkup for your mental health and to talk to your friends about it. You go to the doctor. Now look, your friends don't have all the answers. It may be that you need to go to a counselor, and that is a good thing. And that is okay. There is no shame in going to counseling. There's no shame in and it may not be a permanent thing. You just need to go talk to somebody. It's okay to do that. So you're not alone. Talk about it, okay? Number 2, your diagnosis is not your identity. So whatever you have, that's not who you are. You can be depressed and not be depressed. You know what I'm saying? You can be anxious and not have that as your identity. Hello, my name is Anxious Titus. Hello, I am depressed Titus. That's not how it works. It's not your identity. It is not who you are. Your identity is in Christ. And that is the problem with so much of our culture today is we have identity crisis. We don't know what our identity is. Our identity is found in Christ. It's not found in our sexual orientation. It is not found in our depression. It is not found in our anxiety. It's not found in our PTSD. It is not found in any of those things. It is found in Christ if you are walking and you are a disciple and believer in Christ. Guys, cut it out of it. It is found in Christ. So your diagnosis, whatever you have, is not found. You're not that. You're greater than that. Genesis 1:27, it talks about God has created us in His image. Our identity is not found in what we are diagnosed with. It's found in Christ. Psalms 139:14 also talks about this, how He carefully and perfectly put us together and made us. Number 3, God sees you. God sees you. So you're not alone, but also God sees you. He cares about you. His heart breaks when you're suffering. His heart breaks when you're in pain, when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling alone and scared and anxious. God's heart breaks for you as a child of God. He is moved with compassion. Matthew 9:36 talks about this. Jesus is moved with compassion. And then we see when Jesus and Lazarus, that story we talked about several months ago, it talks about Jesus wept. That's 1 Peter, that's the wrong one. Jesus wept when Lazarus died, and he was with Lazarus' sisters 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. James 4:8 says, come near to God and he will come near to you. God cares about you. When you feel alone and you feel like no one cares, God cares. When you feel depressed, when you feel anxious, when you feel like afraid, when you don't feel right up here, God cares. He cares. So, you're not in the struggle alone. He cares for you. Okay, now I want to talk to the other group. The other group would say, I'm good. I don't have any mental illness. I don't have anything going on. I don't have anything I need to deal with. And I would say, check that. Really check that. Because you can have it and not even realize that you're dealing with depression or anxiety or something else, okay? But I want to talk to the group that says, I'm good. I'm good tonight, okay? Be present with your friends. Be present with your friends. If half of your age group is dealing with this, that means you have friends that are dealing with it. You have friends that suffer from mental illness, that have to fight for their mental health and have to go through these things and suffer. Be present with your friends. Now, what does that mean to be present? That means listen to them. Listen when they talk to you about what they're feeling, about what they're thinking, and don't just try to look for the next thing to move on. Look at them in the eye and talk. Listen to them. Don't talk. Listen. Don't try to fix the problem. Don't say, well, if you'd have done this, you wouldn't be friends. Stop it. Just listen. Listen. Number 2, reaffirm their identity in Christ. Remind them that they are created by God. Reaffirm who created them and how they are special and wonderfully made by Christ. Be that disciple that lifts up your brother and sister and says, you're made by Christ. You are special. Your identity is in him and not in your ADHD, not in your anxiety. Number 3, pray on their behalf. Pray on their behalf. All of us in here should be praying for our friends anyways. And you should be praying for people that you know that are not your friends. You should be praying for your teachers at school. You should be praying for the people that you work with. But especially, you should be praying for your friends that you know struggle with mental illness. You should pray for them. Galatians 6:2 says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. 1 John 5:14 says, this is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. So, where do we take all this tonight? This is kind of intro. Like I said, you are not defined up here. You're not defined by depression, by anxiety, by PTSD. You're not defined by those things. You're defined by Christ. I'm going to pray for us, and then we're going to break up small groups. I know we're over time, but I think we still need to meet tonight as we can. If your parents come to get you, then please feel free to go with them. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for tonight. God, thank you for this time that we've had to look at your word, God. I pray that as we look at this study, that we all be reminded that we are created in your image. God, that we would be reminded